Where is the worst pothole in the Magic Valley? I bring that up because perhaps you can actually come up with something better than what I've seen. Uh, I brought this up briefly with Dan Tom as well in the last half hour, and I referenced the newspaper out of Coeur d'Alene. Now, despite the distance between the northern panhandle and here in the Magic Valley and throughout southern Idaho, the weather patterns have been actually quite similar over the last few weeks. You get a deep freeze, and then all of a sudden you get a day where you get a lot of rain and things thaw, and then all of a sudden you get a deep freeze again, and then 3 days later you get another thaw. And what happens is that water starts to seep down into these cracks in the roads, and then freeze happens again, and then you get potholes. And this is part of life in this part of the world, obviously, but it's being seen all over the Northwest because of these wild swings in the weather. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot of these. So I was driving yesterday after work. I wanted to stop at Winco, and I was going up Fillmore Street, headed north. And some of you know you take a right turn there, and there's a little triangular island right in the middle of the street. You can take a right turn, go up the hill, turn left there by the pet store, and then you just drive down through the parking lot to get to the grocery store. So I went to make my turn, but I have one of the great things about life is, well, before your brain ends up turning to mush, some days when I open the refrigerator and I don't know why I've opened the refrigerator door, I realize that day is coming for me and maybe coming sooner than I would like. But I ended up turning and slowed way down because a few days before I'd gotten to that very same intersection and had realized directly in front of me was a huge pothole. I mean, a big pothole. And knowing that that pothole was there yesterday, I slowed way down. Unfortunately, the guy behind me didn't think I was going to slow down that fast, and he was a little close. I thought he was going to end up smacking the back end of my car with his car, but he did manage to throttle the brake and slow down. Perhaps he thought I was being a little bit on the, I don't know, difficult side, but I ended up just very slowly going up because the potholes across that intersection now, when you turn, seem to go all the way across the street. There are several of them. So I got around the corner very slowly, and then I noticed he apparently didn't think that it was because there was water that had filled in those potholes, which means things will only be worse there as time goes on. But he decided he was going to charge through, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and his kidneys obviously were getting the worst of it as he was bouncing in his seat. And it will rattle you sometimes like that, and you got to realize it's not good for your tires. It's not good for your struts. It's not good for anything really in the undercarriage of your car. And some of these things are monstrous in their size. I blew out a ball joint on a car some years ago. I had to drive a bridge similar to the one over the canyon here, and I came on the on ramp, which is a big long loop to get onto the bridge, and I came around the corner, and it was the week between Christmas and New Year's. It had been cold. It was in a place called Clark Summit, Pennsylvania. And just as I rounded the corner onto the main bridge, I realized there was a moon sized crater. And I smacked that thing but good, and it blew out the ball joint on a vehicle that had 39,000 miles on it, which was terribly distressing because replacing a ball joint, if you've ever had to do that, it'll run you over $1,000. And so it's nothing that you want to mess with. And then when I left the store, I decided a couple of days ago I was going to the same store, going to go to the down the hill the same way I came up the hill. There's another large crater there, and so we're starting to see these. And if you go shop perhaps at the restaurant supply store, and then sometimes make a stop perhaps over at Pizza Pie Cafe, you will notice as you turn off Pole Line Road and start down the Canyon Road, all of a sudden there's an enormous pothole there. Now, this is what I'm seeing, but I'm a little curious this morning, and during the last second hour of the program, last hour of the program today, if periodically you're coming across a big pothole out there, I'd appreciate it if you'd phone it in so the rest of us will know where it is. So when we approach, we'll remember to slow down so we're not left with $1,000 in repairs like I once had many years ago when I caught one of these monstrous craters. Telephone number to reach our program today is 736-0300. That's 736-0300. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story. on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Also, I wanted to point out, too, if you could, email me some of the photographs of some of these. Give me permission to use the photograph, and what I'll do is I'll post some of them to our website as well to sort of help people understand just the enormity of some of these craters. We've got a caller with us, and caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Yeah, I got a couple for you, Bill. If you turn off pole line going beside the Magic Valley Mall going into Sportsman's Warehouse, there's two big ones right there turning into the parking lot.
Okay.
Thanks.
And the bone rattling, I'm sure, if you come across those. And there's nothing I think that we can seriously do. I'm not going to sit here and demand government must go out there and remedy this, because you could go out there and you could throw coal patch down, and then within 2 days the coal patch is going to pop out because of freezing and thawing. So we've got to deal with it at least until the weather stabilizes and it's a little bit warmer, and then you can go about fixing some of these things. But it just, I think I may have actually experienced the one he was talking about, because I was up in the mall complex a couple of days ago, and I noticed them ahead of time where I had plenty of time to slow down and was actually able to skirt them. But sometimes you just don't even have an opportunity for that. If you come around a corner and there's traffic in the other lane coming your way, and depending on what speed you are and how close you are to that pothole, you're gonna kiss that thing, but good in that situation. So again, as I was pointing out, I'd be curious to know where these happen to be, and I'm sure that we're talking a wide range from people listening all the way out toward Rupert and American Falls and Burley, and people in Oakley, and people in Jerome, and people out in Castleford and Buell. You're all coming up with some of these. You're up next on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story. It's 9:14. Go ahead.
Good morning, Bill. This is Pat.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to congratulate you on your column again the other day in Times News. You're probably the only reason I want to keep my Times News subscription.
And that was about roads too, as it turns
Yeah,
out.
that was a good article. I admire your ability to put things down in words that you can have a good time with.
And I referenced Leon Transo in that story, who worked for both President Nixon and President Reagan, whose job was to save government money. And as he told me at a meeting one time, he said, you get all of these people who come to all of these hearings begging for people's taxpayers' money, and they'll start by telling you, if you don't give me the money, 1 million children are going to die. And then when you debunk that, he said, and then they'll tell you, well, if you don't give me the money, 100,000 children will end up dying. And he says, when you keep showing them otherwise, they'll just keep throwing other excuses out there until they put their tails between their legs, call you mean-spirited, and they leave for another year before they come back and beg again. But government does have serious responsibilities, roads being one of those. If you're not the federal government, that's to defend us. But at the state level is really to make sure the roads are working.
Well, without our roads, our commerce would stop in this state.
Yeah, because think about that. All the farmers, whether you be growing something, whether it be potatoes or watermelons, or if you're a dairy farmer, how do you get anything out off the farm to a market, right, without a good road in front of you?
You got to have excellent roads for the commerce to go in and to be processed, and for the process to leave.
And then that helps you raise the tax revenue from businesses that are growing to pay for the other things that you would have as well. Which, see, this is the part, Pat, that mystifies me, that the left doesn't seem to be able to make that connection at any point.
Well, I got high hopes for this new presidency that we have coming in, that we can see maybe some common sense put back into government. That's all I can hope for.
Hey, by the way, do you have a pothole that's caused you trouble or grief recently?
Well, not lately, but there's a lot of them out here. I'll tell you what, if you're on Highway 93 or Highway 30 going over past Buell or going to Hegerman, you got to pay attention to what you're looking for, because there's getting to be a lot of potholes everywhere. And I noticed if a person stares at the pothole, you have a tendency to hit it. So don't look at the dang thing. Look somewhere else.
Pat, thanks for the call and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye now, 9:16. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. It's 18. That's true, though. You know, somehow when you lock in on the thing, it's difficult to try and avoid it then. And that boom. And it's just, there's nothing You know, every time you hit one of these, even if the tire stays on and you don't break a tie rod and everything seems to be fine, every time you do that, you're just making things worse. Because if you do it 10 times, it's like jumping off a. Years ago, I remember I used to, when I was a kid, we'd be working sometimes in the box of a pickup truck unloading stuff. And when you're young and you're flexible, I would leap out of the pickup truck and boom, feet hit the ground and I'd be fine. Tried that when I was getting older, and all of a sudden you just feel this like pain go up your spine. And if you do that too often, all of a sudden that's going to, it's like anything else. You beat on it long enough, it's eventually going to break. 9:17 now. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. There is a fellow writing at Eric Erickson's website, The Resurgent. And I saved his column today because he talks about how liberals are unable sometimes to process just basic, what you'd call common sense. We've known, he writes, his name is Steve Berman. He says, we've known for quite some time that being a liberal requires the world and everyone in it to align with those particular theories and engineered outcomes that are demanded by your progressive thought. And then he says, Jonathan Haidt, who's a secular liberal, or Haidt, I guess is the pronunciation, presented a thesis about the genesis and nature of human morality, which proves this point. He said there are 5 foundations of morality: harm and care, fairness and reciprocity, group loyalty, that would be tribalism, authority and respect, and purity, sanctity. He found that in general, the moral mind of liberals rests on 2 of the 5, harm and fairness. Liberals have a much harder time understanding conservatives than vice versa because conservatives, they use all 5. So when surveys were done and conservatives were told, pretend you're a liberal and answer this series of questions or problems, they pretty much answered as a liberal would answer. Oh, just throw some money at it. On the other hand, when liberals were told to try and come at the answer and pretend they were conservatives, all they would do is create some sort of caricature of some mean-spirited Nazi. That's all they'd get out of it. So they're 3 beers short of a 6-pack or a 5-pack in this particular situation because they don't talk about that. And I was reading not long ago about how these people, a guy was arguing with an atheist, and the atheist said that none of your talk about heaven and hell and judgment and right and wrong really has any meaning. It's all relative. So the Christian said, all right, if I take a newborn baby and put it on a table and start chopping it up, is that evil? And the atheist stood there and said, well, I can't make that judgment. Holy smokes. This is why we have so many, half of America is now taking that approach. Half of your countrymen. Now, maybe not in places like southern Idaho, but think about that. You're on the street in a lot of other places around this country. And because of the average, that means that there are actually more of these dummies in other places. More than half. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 18. A little bit more to talk about in the way of some of this divide between the right and the left. That's on the way in a few minutes. And we're looking for a high temperature today. No, 30-something? Is that it? More potholes on the way. I just want to give a shout out to Thomas. He dropped me a couple of messages this morning, and he explains that he is actually out right now on pothole patrol, and that they are making notes on whether he's actually charged with getting these things fixed. And so he dropped me a line to say that they actually heard me talking about it while they were out doing the search. It's 9:23. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Penny Bain just sent me an email where she says that there are goodies in our conference room. I've been occasionally I will sample some of these goodies this time of year, but on the other hand, you don't need to eat the whole platter. And because I have been on a weight loss program and doing somewhat well over the last few months, I guess I'm up to a full 3 months now. We started September 19th, and I'm down more than 50 pounds since we started. And I've been telling you about this, for the last couple of months, and it's been amazing for me sometimes to see after a few weeks how much weight I can actually drop. But a lot of this comes down to just following a strict regimen as prescribed by a diet that you have. But I've tried other diets and they haven't been effective. This one has. The Total Body Transformation System promotes healthy weight loss and wellness. It's not some sort of fad diet. I mean, you're not going to be starving all the time either. You don't have these issues that crop up with a lot of these other diets. The system was developed by a company that's been in business for over 20 years. They have an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau. Youngest company ever featured on the cover of Success magazine. It supported the diet by a number of scientists from some of the leading Ivy League universities in America. The Total Body Transformation System has been awarded 2 U.S. patents. One reduces waist circumference, the other for increasing metabolic rate and weight control. And it has been proven that it burns 6 times more fat, and you lose 8 times more weight than normal results from diet and exercise alone. And the average person is losing 22 pounds in 60 days and 4 inches off a waistline. And also, the meal replacement that this diet includes is healthier than what we're generally eating on a daily basis. It's also sustainable because you're not walking around hungry all the time. You can get a decent amount of calories. You can still eat the things that you like to eat. We also wanted to point out it is all natural and scientifically validated ingredients. These result in appetite control, that increased fat burning, and a healthy natural boost of energy. In fact, I was shocked at the energy levels I had within a week of starting this. My contact on this, Don Chandler, was in studio with us the other day. Don has lost 50 pounds himself. Don is available. Of course, it's an Idaho Exchange, 208. It's 208-731-3560. Contact Don Chandler. Again, 731-3560. Bill Colley with you until 10 o'clock this morning, and then the Rush Limbaugh program will be coming along following that. So I was talking a little bit about differences between Democrats and Republicans. It's not just in their personalities and in their worldviews. I've got this from the New York Times, a writer by the name of Thomas B. Edsall. You know, if Edsall was on the air with Don Lemon over at CNN, would that be considered synonymous? Because my dad always told me the Edsall was a lemon. All right, story for another day, I'm sure. He says one problem for Democrats is Democratic voters. Oops. Gosh, you mean the people who actually come out and cast the ballots don't like us? But he goes on to say, and I'm going to hopscotch. This was very long. I printed it out. Town Square Media is not going to be happy with me because it's 9 pages long, and I'm only going to read a few paragraphs from it. Democratic voters themselves are becoming increasingly pro-trade. He says, here's the trend data from 2009 to late October 2016. Now, this comes from the Pew Research Center. It shows that Democrats have shifted from being against pro-trade or being lukewarm on it to now being in fact, it's 56 to 31%. Well, these are the well-heeled Democrats who live in Silicon Valley and then on the East Coast as well, in some of these places where they have a lot of trade deals with the high-tech businesses they own. Conversely, the Republican electorate, egged on by Donald Trump, he doesn't like Donald Trump, that's why he says egged on, has flipped. As recently as March 2 years ago, before anyone gave a thought to a Trump presidential bid, Pew found that Republican voters were solidly in the free trade camp, 55 to 36. By October 2016, so we're not talking a lot of distance here, Republican voters had become decisively anti-trade. This is the number that really is key. 68% of Republicans are now opposed to the trade deals that we have. Now, I don't think it's necessarily free trade. I think Trump himself has made mention. He's not a guy who's wholeheartedly against free trade, but we don't have fair trade. When he says that countries take advantage of us, he's not kidding. There was a story I read some years ago. It's a fine car. I mean, I debated. I bought a Chevy Malibu recently at Lithia, and I'm happy with that. Quite happy. Nice smooth ride. But I did consider some other models too. One of those that I considered was the same type of class, the Hyundai Sonata. But that's a car that's heavily subsidized by the South Korean government. And they subsidize these automobiles, and they sell them to the tune of about $750,000 a year in the United States, which is a pretty big throw. On the other hand, South Korea only allows us to ship 700 cars to that country for market every year. Now, I'm not necessarily, I don't have a PhD in mathematics, but 750,000 is certainly a lot larger than 700. Does that seem fair? The number of Republicans by election day who actually were for free trade was down to just 24%. So there's a difference, 68 to 24. Now, a lot of the actual working class Democrats, those who don't live in Silicon Valley or on the East Coast, they're thinking along the same lines as working class Republicans, and they see this system as terribly unfair. And the writer says Democrats addressing trade and globalization concerns face not only a base sharply split over these issues, but also growing difficulties in the party's traditional responses to employment dislocation. Both job training and education have become increasingly ineffective. Yeah, all of these. Well, we're just gonna once we put the coal industry out of business, we'll have them all learn how to be short order cooks. Yes, because there are just millions and millions of jobs in short order cooks. Yes, it's not working for people, and it hasn't worked. The law of diminishing returns has been active in this for a long, long time. People are PO'd. They want something other than, well, if you go to this course for 6 months and we'll give you plenty of food stamps and heating assistance and then when you're done you can make half of what you made before. Won't that be good? 9:30. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and News Radio 13. And then they call us mean-spirited. It's 18 right now. I've got more on this divide coming up in just a few minutes. You're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, but also online at newsradio1310.com. Means you can take us anywhere all over the world if you just click on the Listen Live button. So we were mentioning this divide that we have out there. Now, I've got to give credit to at least Democrats in Idaho, Magic Valley, and really throughout the state. And you think about the worst offenders would likely be in places like Blaine County and Moscow and Lewiston, but they have been, no one in this state, I mean, very few people have gone out and marched in the streets, called the election illegitimate. In other words, they just quietly accepted it, you would think. I mean, well, if they haven't accepted it, they're still being quiet. And that's what you have to do. You have to go back in a political situation. Not that I'm trying to give them any advice, but they have to go back and start making plans. Okay, how do we appeal to the electorate? Well, maybe what you're appealing with is the problem. There's this notion that you misjudged what the people wanted. A guy by the name of Charlie Cook, appearing on MSDNC yesterday, he writes the Cook Report. He points out, he says, Democrats, the leadership, lost track of what the American people wanted. And the American people aren't necessarily for all these social issues. It still comes down to dollars and cents, the lunch bucket issues.
Well, I think Democrats don't know how to talk to a lot of these people that go to church, people of value. I mean, the Democratic Party has become a secular party. I mean, it has become a party that almost...
Outside African Americans.
Yes.
It's like one...
exactly.
Where they're not secular.
It almost, other than a couple prayers at the convention every 4 years, that's it. And the thing is, a lot of Americans and a lot of these voters out in sort of real America, where I grew up, and, okay, sort of where you grew up, right. These are people with a different value structure, and they don't recognize where the Democratic Party has become.
So he references a few prayers at a convention. Heck, they booed God in 2012, and if I remember, in 2016 they wouldn't even put any references to God in the party platform. How do you then go about telling regular Americans, yeah, we're for you, but first of all, let me shred your Bible? It's just, I'm sorry, they have completely missed the body temperature, if you will, of the nation. We have a caller with us. It's 9:36. It's 19 now. Highest point I've seen this morning. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. But caller, you're up next.
Good morning, Bill. You're right. They have missed the point. The point is human beings need to work. They need to have a feeling of accomplishment. They cannot just sit around, listen to propaganda, or watch propaganda media all day long. They need to be out doing something to energize themselves, because if they don't and they just lounge around doing nothing, it only leads to horrendous bad acts.
Well, think about it. Yeah, well, thank you, but hold on a minute. Think about that for a second. We've got this video from MTV where it says, if telling you if you're white, you need to give everybody an apology, especially if you're a white man. Now, how does that put anyone to work? Or how does same-sex marriage put anybody to work? Or how does allowing grown men who think they're women to use the little girls' room and locker room? See, that's the point you just made. Those things, a lot of people out there may not even be against those things, but they don't actually add anything to our lives. Think about that for a moment, right?
Absolutely correct. The mindset by watching and listening to propaganda TV is deplorable. We're losing our self-worth when we listen to all that garbage.
Amen. Hey,
Have a good
thank you.
day.
Wonderful call. And by the way, if I don't hear from some of these callers tomorrow, I want to wish them Merry Christmas today, although we'll be here tomorrow. In fact, we're going to be talking firearms in hour number 2 of the program with Todd Eccles and Forrest Anderson. So we hope you can stick around for that tomorrow, too, as well. The thing is, look, I was opposed to same-sex marriage because on religious grounds, I didn't believe in it. I think it runs counter to God's law. But on the other hand, we aren't a theocracy, and I understood that, and I knew when it went to court we weren't going to win that one. But government shouldn't be in the marriage business in the first place, and you can't put someone in jail just because they claim they're married. If someone wants to say they're married, why do they even need benefit of clergy? This is America, right? You could just basically say, I am, therefore. But see, government wants to use it because it can manipulate tax law that way, and that way they can use that as a cudgel against you. But what really galled me after it finally became law, and there was nothing I could do about it, but it's like, okay, they're not bothering me. But if I don't want to bake a cake for them, why are they bothering those folks on this side? Why would they come after me? If I don't want to go take the photographs for the wedding. You know, that's the point. That's what, if I'm somebody out there as well, I'm looking at these issues and I'm saying to myself, this country has not gotten better since 2008, since the meltdown, the economic meltdown. Now, the libs just had 8 years to get things in order. And for the first 2 years of that, they had complete control, just like Donald Trump will, over the entire government, because they had both the House and the Senate the first 2 years of the Obama White House. And instead they said, well, we'll give you a health care system that doesn't work. No! Or they threw money away on Solyndra and other boondoggles when we needed people to get back to work, and we basically needed relief from regulation. And the list of regulations this government has imposed upon people in the last 8 years, I saw the percentages in the Wall Street Journal the other day. Research has been done on this. The suffocation of American business. American business can't grow and get us out of this mess. And all they want to do is say, hey, Jimmy over there isn't sure what he is, so he's going to come use your 3-year-old daughter's restroom. No! Turn the economy around. 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. It's 19. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Well, we're down to about the last quarter hour of the program today. About 15 minutes to go. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Next week, while I'm on vacation, we'll still have a lot of the regular guests. They'll be joining Steve Millington in studio. Monday, we have no show, but Steve is here from Tuesday through Friday. And Jeremy Daly, a physician assistant from Tripp Family Medicine, will be in studio. I saw Jeremy yesterday. I was talking earlier about leaving Winco and dodging potholes in the streets. And as I was driving north on Fillmore Street after leaving the store, Jeremy was walking back apparently on the lunch hour, and he had to apparently, not only is he curing people, but he apparently had to buy lunch for everybody else in the office because he had some big boxes with him, which leads me to believe he had to do some legwork. But if you're looking for some just typical traditional family medicine versus some of the assembly line medicine we now have today, Tripp Family Medicine is the place to go. Tripp Family Medicine is still looking for new patients. And often as a patient of Tripp Family Medicine, if you have an issue come up, they can generally see you on the very same day. Generally being the operative word there. So just wanted to pass that along. Jeremy's scheduled to be in studio talking health next Wednesday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. Tripp Family Medicine is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office. Caller joining us this morning at 9:44. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
I just wanted to say I was raised Democrat all my life, but I think the Democratic Party has changed from back in the 1950s and 60s. And I truly believe that people need to get back to looking at the policies and not the people. The policies are what you're going to live with when the people are gone.
Yeah.
So I have relatives, they strictly vote because they're black or because they're a woman or because they're a Democrat, not because of the policies, and that's what's hurting our country. They really need to look at the policies and realize education isn't free. Somebody has to pay for it. And it's going to be the everyday man that's out there working every single day.
I'd never heard of the phrase yellow dog Democrat until I was watching. Charlie Rose used to have an overnight show about 30 years ago, and I used to work in a hotel on an overnight shift, running the front desk, and the TV would be on for company in the background because it was slow. And he had Carol O'Connor on the show with him one night, and O'Connor, of course, played a conservative on TV, but was in real life was a very liberal guy. And he asked him about that, and he says, "Well, Charlie, I'm a yellow dog Democrat." And Charlie Rose said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "If there's a yellow dog on the ballot and he's a Democrat, I'll vote for him." And I think about that because when I was young, my mother, they were Republicans in her family, but my dad was an old Kennedy Democrat. But in 1980, he voted for Ronald Reagan, and he ended up voting for Ronald Reagan twice. It was because he'd become and he actually supported at one time George Wallace, not because my dad was a racist or anything like that, but because he felt that the Democrat Party by the late 1960s had become nothing but a bunch of, scalawags and communists. And so he had started looking for other people he could support. So by the 1980s, he was also a Republican. And because he had been a Democrat right up through 1980, that was the first year I registered. I registered that year when I turned 18 as a Democrat, but I didn't vote for any because they were the party of abortion. And over the years, I just said, well, this is silly. I left the party for that reason not long afterward. And your situation is true. A lot of people who knew that party as being a friend of the working man and woman look back at it now and they realize it's certainly not the same party today, and it really hasn't been for 40 or 50 years. Still with me? I may have lost our caller. Sometimes I talk too much. I know I'm paid to do it, but sometimes it just might be a little bit too much. But that was the thing. I couldn't square that with, Jimmy Carter was an incompetent, and Walter Mondale was a useless incompetent. That I'm sorry. And then Michael Dukakis came along. Oh my goodness. Oh, they called that a candidate in the first place. I'm sorry. And when he's asked that question about, well, if you're remember the debate with George H.W. Bush and Bernard Shaw from CNN is asking the candidates, if your wife were raped and murdered, would you favor the death penalty? And George H.W. Bush says, Bernie, what kind of a question is that? It's my wife you're talking about. And Michael Dukakis says, the death penalty is a bad idea. Let me cite some statistics here. Is this guy a human being or is he just a robot? And then comes along Bill Clinton, who's the biggest liar and scoundrel in American political history going back to, I don't know, Franklin Roosevelt. That might even anger some more people out there. But the fact of the matter is, we've been sold a bill of goods by that party. And now they're trying to tell us if you don't want to go hold hands with somebody of the same sex or go potty next to little girls if you're a man and you disapprove of it, that you're wrong and you're bad. I don't think so. We have another caller with us. It's 9:48. It's 19 still. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Caller, you're up next.
Bill, I just want to tell you that I really enjoy the show, and that Tuesday night I had the rare privilege of doing a ride-along with Twin Falls Finest. And during the ride-along, I got to see what they do on the job, and I got to witness a couple of bookings. And I tell you, it made me a lot less troubled about paying my tax dollars. Did 2 bookings at the county jail, and those people are extremely overworked, and it was a very stressful situation for them that night. And I just wanted to call and pass that on, that the people that work in the jail and the officers that are out on patrol are doing a wonderful job for us.
And I thank you for the call. And it's good to know. And last Saturday morning when I was doing my shopping and I came out of the store and I saw police cars and fire engines outside Target just down the walkway, I thought, uh-oh, gee, has there been a fire or did somebody try to rob the place? Well, you know what they were doing? They were taking needy families Christmas shopping. And so I stopped and I thought, well, we have a very tall police officer in town. He's got a very Irish last name, and I stopped to talk to him for a moment. He said, "Oh yeah, we're also going to be ringing the bells at 9 o'clock down at Walmart." So the firefighters were at the west door, and police were at the east door, and they were ringing the bells and raising money for Salvation Army. I told one of the police officers at Walmart, I said, "Yeah, well, the other bell ringers have told me the east door is better." So the firefighters were at an immediate disadvantage, but it's a friendly competition. 736-0300, 736-0300. They generally arrest you when you do something really bad. That people get angry about that, but that's generally what happens. If you're being good. Now, once in a while, there's a mistake made, but if you just stay calm during the mistake, it'll get cleared up. We have a caller with us, 10 minutes now away from 10 o'clock. You're up next on KLIX.
I was just listening to your conversation about the gay marriage and all that. With this election that we had in November and watching the Democrats just implode over trying to somehow get Hillary elected still, it's laughable because, the thing is they're just not listening to us. It's like with Black Lives Matter, they have this war on the police, and it's like, most of society does not approve of this. And, if you're going to go and you're going to aim a gun at a police officer, I'm sorry, you deserve to get shot no matter what color you are.
Yeah.
And if you end up dead, oh well, Anyway, I hope you have a good Christmas.
You
We'll
too.
talk to you later.
Hey, thank you. You too. Hillary Clinton. I mean, you want to talk about being tone deaf. She was talking with a group of people during the campaign at some point, and the subject came up about how a lot of Christians, evangelicals, and then Roman Catholics, Southern Baptists, and Mormons, and some of the biggest denominations in this country are opposed because, well, they believe in this Bible thing, and the Bible says certain things about certain behaviors. It doesn't mean that we're out to, slam people into closets or string them up or, burn them at the stake. No, it doesn't mean that at all because Christians realize they're all sinners themselves and they've all got something to atone for. And other people say, well, I'm not a sinner just because you don't agree with my lifestyle. Well, you're probably sinning in some other ways. Everybody does it. It's not one of those things. We're not perfect people. We're trying to achieve perfection, but we don't get there. That's the message. Clinton is talking with this group of people and says Christians are going to have to learn to change their belief systems. Hillary Clinton is telling you, look, I'm going to be president. Therefore, I'm going to replace God in your lives. That's how that comes across to a lot of voters. I'm sorry to warn Democrats out there, but that's not the way you're going to win the votes of people who have traditional values in this country. No, you need to give up God and let me tear those pages out, and your church has to change to be more like the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party has been around for, well, it morphed out of the old Democrat Republicans in the early days of the Republic. So it's been around a little over 200 years, I suppose. The Christians have been around for 2,000, and the tradition handed down from our Hebraic fathers goes back several thousand more years before that. Which one of you do you think is going to last longer? 9:53. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Speaking of the folks on the left still having difficulty adjusting, I want you to listen to this. I pulled this sound from a video this morning from Media Research Center, and it is very entertaining. It's called Snowflakes. It's an actor portraying a role, but it's very, very funny.
Hi, my name is Blaine. I'm a 19-year-old college student, and I am a snowflake. When I first came to college, it was really hard for me because no one had ever really disagreed with me before. I remember having to study Columbus Day and economics and some really triggering things. I just couldn't believe anyone would actually say something so different from what I thought. And then when Donald Trump was elected president, I fell apart. I remember thinking, this just can't be happening. This cannot be happening. I mean, The idea that someone I didn't vote for might run the country isn't something any snowflake should have to deal with. But then Monday was, it was a really awful day. The Electoral College could have saved us from Donald Trump, and they didn't. They could have voted against what all the people in their states wanted. And Michael Moore even said he'd pay their fines if they voted for Hillary. Up until that point, I think somewhere I still believed we would be okay. But now it's not. And I'm running out of crayons, and I'm not really sure what to do. I'm not sure what democracy is exactly, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't mean losing elections. Save the Snowflakes is important because it really helps provide snowflakes like me with a safe space where we don't have to worry about being offended or having our feelings hurt, which can be really hard to deal with when you're going through the stress of having to write papers for your lesbian dance theory class. And if something does trigger me, I know that Save the Snowflakes will be there for me with whatever I need. On really hard days, I need to sit down and play with toys or color, but I know Save the Snowflakes will make sure I have those things. And not having to worry about dealing with my own hurt feelings has really freed up a lot of my time, all thanks to Save the Snowflakes. In the end, I can finally get back to doing things I love. I think without Save the Snowflakes, I would cry by myself a lot more. I'm just really thankful for this organization, and I hope more people will support it. It's really important to show snowflakes like myself how much our feelings really matter.
No, I'm going to tell you, I don't know that I ever got that much out of college. I got to read some great books, which I probably would never have heard of, and I found out I did enjoy them. That part of college was okay. The rest of it was just a bunch of guys hanging around guzzling beer and ogling young women and vice versa. So I don't know. I could have done this job, I suppose, without it. But I don't ever remember anybody on campus walking around whining that their feelings were hurt and somebody needed to do something about it. Although we were just starting to move that direction. The college president's son was the leader of the college Democrats, and he was a whining lib. And I remember encountering him at a few events and realizing these guys, they're not going to be able to survive if push ever came to shove in this world. And then a friend of mine, she was walking home with some people from the dorm one night. They'd been out visiting somewhere, and one of the idiots she was with kicked over a trash barrel. So he got a ticket from university police for kicking over a trash barrel. He was thought he was being funny. It was stupid, and we were all young kids at the time. Well, they hauled her into the hearing too as well, and they were telling her that she had to moderate her behavior, and that if she didn't, she'd get into serious trouble. Even though, of course, she'd just been a bystander in all of this, and she said, well, I guess you've got to do what you've got to do. And then they ended up throwing the book at her because she said that, because they said it showed that she did not yet fully understand her actions. And we were just starting, and this was the early 1980s, we were just starting to lose it. You think about that. We've got 2 or 3 generations of people out there who won't be able to deal with it if we ever have to. Well, like we were talking earlier about Last Stand Survival Shop, if we ever end up in a period where the grocery stores aren't open and the roads, are clogged with people fleeing, I don't know how we're going to ever deal with anything like that anymore in this country. This is certainly not the greatest generation we've got out there ready to take on the world. God willing, if the creek don't rise, I'll be back here tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. In the meantime, the Rush Limbaugh program is next, following news from Fox right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.